Oshi no Ko is a series that I've been disappointed more and more in as I've tried to engage further with it. To start, I haven't read the manga and I'm not sure if I will, but I might just out of curiosity. I feel like I've lost some of that curiosity though for the series as it's gone on, as I increasingly get a better idea of the direction of the story. I was quite excited for the show week to week until about episode 6, and it's been downhill for me the more I've thought about it since then. Let me present my gripes with Oshi no Ko as of having finished the anime and why it's annoyed me more and more as I think about it. While I made a video complaining about some aspects of it, I think Oshi no Ko gets off to a decently strong start. Ai's death, oops, spoilers, is a good hook to grab people and get them invested in seeing that plotline resolved. Aqua seeking the person who is basically at fault for her death and is almost certainly his father gives us a strong emotional narrative to follow and a real reason to tune in every week. Which it needs, because it's going to drag us through the depths of boredom in order to get there. Part 1. Writing style. I want to start with what is probably the most obvious point for people who don't like this show, but the show is goddamn slow.
Could you be any slower?
The pace at which things happen isn't, like, horrible, but the actual scenes themselves drag on forever. The writing for this series seems more akin to a novel, with long overdone scenes of characters monologuing in their heads or at others about what is going on, the state of the acting or idol industry, or just daftly detailing every tidbit about themselves. Which is surprising considering it's based on a manga and not a light novel. I don't necessarily dislike this kind of writing, but it needs to be done well, and this is not it. I thought the first real arc where Aqua is helping Kana film the last stretch of Sweet Today is interesting in concept, but it dragged on for nearly 2 entire episodes that largely consist of Kana going on in detail about why the adaptation is bad, how the acting industry works, in terms of hiring all these pretty boys for the sake of marketing, yada yada yada. I think learning about the industry is interesting, but I have a couple of issues with it, how it's presented in Oshi no Ko. First, the writing of the series is not nearly strong enough to give me any amount of confidence that the author is communicating things accurately as they exist in reality. Second, you do really have to take the author's word on everything. I won't claim to know if Akasaka has seen the inner workings of tons of idol groups and management therein, or if he's had an active role in the casting, planning, and shooting of a bunch of different series. The dude was probably heavily involved in at least the adaptation of this show and Love is War, but that doesn't necessarily make him an expert, especially on non-animated series like reality TV shows. I just don't like that I have to make an educated guess that he knows what he's talking about to enjoy these scenes where he cynically talks about an industry we all already know sucks, and hope that the degree to which he describes them being annoying or awkward isn't exaggerated for epic anime plot reasons. I can only really passively enjoy the existence of these things without that layer of trust, but it seems like the fans of the series are 100% sold on it being the word of God. I've seen the series receive so much praise for being accurate to the industry by people with 0 hours in the industry, which is not how we should be criticizing shows and is not showing proper skepticism. Personally, I'm inclined to believe that he is on the money and describing everything very accurately, but the willingness to buy into it wholesale I've seen is a little strange, to say the least. Third, and most importantly, the biggest problem with learning about the industry is that we almost exclusively learn about it in the show through characters just sitting there and explaining it for paragraphs on end to others. It's at best rather awkward and hurts the tone and pacing, and at worst very poor writing that completely sucks me out of the episode at times. I've remarked before that the show is very handholdy and foreshadows things multiple times in advance to its detriment, but this is a whole other instance of it. Why does Kana have to sit there and monologue to me for several minutes about the production of Sweet Today being bad and the actors they hired just being empty-brain pretty boys who don't know how to act if we're going to watch them act? Just show me the scene. I want to watch them act. I don't want to listen to you telling me about the acting instead. You can just show it, then maybe make a remark like, well, he wasn't hired for his acting anyways. We don't have to sit there for this long. And this is a huge overlying issue with the series. By the time Kana explained for the 17th time her entire personality, I was checking out and just completely annoyed. It reeks of this teen melodramatic writing where the characters just explain their entire ethos in their head that they apparently live by to the T. Again, I don't inherently dislike this kind of writing, but you really have to sell me on it being justified by the characters having some real depth to them, and the setting and plot being very interesting. I could almost criticize Mushoku Tensei of the same thing, because we are largely inside a character's head, listening to them describe how they perceive the world. But it works for me there because the character, actually has an interesting viewpoint that is constantly changing through his experiences. We see the gaps in his understanding and watch him come face to face with them and adjust. Or we watch other characters do things and see how their perspectives on each other differ. Or we are thinking about a much more interesting situation instead, with a lot of problems and solutions to think through, like a mystery. The show just lets itself breathe a lot more. There's a lot of quiet moments that they took the time to specifically adapt like that in the anime compared to the light novels. Oshi no Ko would work decently with this rather dry and dialogue-heavy style of exposition as long as the characters and their world are interesting. Which, they are not. Part 2. Characters. Ai Hoshino is a solid character, but as we know, she kind of gets stabbed and dies horribly, leaving us instead focusing on an entirely different cast of characters, along with our titular former Dr. Aqua and his sister Ruby. This is where I really have to drop the hammer down on this series, unfortunately. Oshinoko has one of the most boring, unfunny cast of characters I've had to stomach in a series as highly rated as this one. I am seriously and genuinely confused by those who consider this cast extremely memorable or likable. Let's start with the star of the show, Aqua. Aqua is one of the most confusingly constructed characters I've seen since Kirito from Sword Art Online. In one of many similarities to your typical isekai protagonist, Aqua is the most brooding asshole this side of the main character from Arifureta. Let's go back to when he was a doctor though, working as a gynecologist in some random-ass backwoods area of Japan. When we meet him, he's had exactly one noteworthy thing happen in his entire life, which is that he was the doctor for Serena. She was terminally ill and loved idols more than anything else, wishing she could one day dance and sing like them despite her illness. The doctor grows attached to her before she ultimately dies, and he continues to watch her favorite idol in memory of her, which is sweet. I like this plotline and concept. Back in present day, at the show's beginning, the Doctor is now insane person levels of obsessed with Hoshino Ai, which feels like a strange jump. I think it makes sense for him to continue all his time to watch and enjoy her as an idol, but it's really strange that it has evolved to this degree where he's like all crazy person watching this in his patient's room and being annoying. He's also at the level where he's basically in love with Ai, who, mind you, is 16. FBI, open up! Because that's just what being a fan of an idol is like, man. You either don't care at all, or you're the weirdest person in a 50-mile radius. Sure, man. This characterization is weird and it annoys me upon revisiting it, but it's fine. What's less fine is that after being Ai's kid for a while and generally having a very positive look on life at this point, we're still not really sure the direction of his character. Where does he go from here? The answer is nowhere. Ai gets stabbed and bleeds out, and Aqua loses all connection to anything and everything. In what feels like something he should grow past, instead he does literally nothing but mope for a literal decade and completely give up on life save for finding his father and mother's killer. You lost me here. Why is he so upset to the point where he doesn't care about anything anymore ever again? Shouldn't a doctor be able to understand and cope with loss of loved ones at some point? What happened to, like, any motivation he could possibly have? I get that Ai was tremendously important to him, but surely he was alive for some other reason than that prior to finding out about Ai or to losing her? Again, this man just has nothing to his character beforehand, so it's impossible for us to know anything else about him. He was just a random NPC doctor without a backstory beforehand, so now that the one plot-relevant detail to him gets killed, he just goes back to having no motivations or thoughts besides revenge? In the very good ending theme, Mephisto, a big focus is made on the idea that Ai was the one who gave Aqua more time, which is a cool idea. In a way, he has Ai to thank for being alive again, neglecting that she also is kind of why he dies, I guess, but whatever. However, I fail to see this as meaningful when Aqua seems to completely be uninterested in actually being alive. He doesn't want to do anything and only cares for his sister's safety out of what almost feels more like necessity than any actual meaningful interaction between their characters. How can we make a big deal about being given a second lease on life if the character just doesn't want to use it for anything? Aqua is not a character that can lead a story unless we focus heavily on the revenge arc, which the show understands. Unfortunately, tidbits about his father are very far and few between, with the anime so far basically ending on what is, I don't know, she probably fell in love with someone at this theater group. Meanwhile, I'm 6 hours into the show grasping for things to enjoy between these disconnected tidbits. The revenge basically serves as a plot device to get Aqua to do anything, for any reason, ever, because again, he's the most obnoxious and brooding teenager ever now. I compare him to Kirito because he's similarly antisocial and dislikes doing anything for any reason outside of basically being forced. As someone who has seen a lot of trash isekai, Aqua basically reads the same as any generic, edgy isekai protagonist. He hates doing anything, but for plot reasons or because he feels bad eventually, is basically forced into it by those around him. In doing the bare minimum, this obviously wins him the affection of basically any girl tangentially related to the plot, such as Kana, Akane, and apparently Ruby. It's a very basic wish fulfillment fantasy trope that you usually see in random web novels about killing monsters and being the strongest, coolest guy ever, not in a self-serious series taking a cynical and realistic eye to the entertainment industry. How am I supposed to trust the series' perspective on the industry when it portrays its characters so simple and childishly? At the end of the very second arc, where Aqua is on this reality dating show featuring teen influencers while attending famous person school, Aqua apparently has collected a fanbase of random girls who squee and watch him read on campus. I didn't realize I was watching Isekai Cheat Skill. I thought we made fun of shows for doing this, but I guess when a smart and serious show does it, then it's okay. I don't really see what's so interesting about this character besides that he looks really cool and occasionally is badass. Look, I don't by default hate shows that do this or anything, and I've given a lot of very nice scores to shows much dumber than this one, but at least in those dumb isekai where the main character is obviously just wish fulfillment, the show doesn't take itself super seriously and delivers on fun character moments instead, rather than pretending to be a cynical and self-serious analytical take on the industry. Beyond what I've outlined here, this character doesn't really have anything to him. He's in the extremely strange and complicated and interesting and nuanced position of being an adult reincarnated hanging around teenagers, but he doesn't really explore it outside of being confused on whether or not he should feel so enamored with Ai and what this means. He's so disinterested in engaging with anyone outside of personally furthering his investigation that we don't explore these ideas at all. Aqua has a one-off line about his physiology of being a teenager blurring the line for who he really is anymore at this stage of his second life, but God forbid we continue on that train of thought or explain it beyond 5 seconds. Nope, we need that time to explain in many paragraphs the exact next scene of the episode that's about to happen, or to have the newest character explain their entire lives to us in their head before we meet them. Speaking of characters that do this, Kana is worth discussing. Kana is a character brimming with dichotomies, in and outside of the series narrative. On one hand, it's very easy to slam her into very normal tsundere tropes. She's never honest with her feelings and constantly berates everyone around her, despite actually deep down caring about them all a lot. She's even secretly in love with the main character, Aqua, because he's the main character, and likely the only other human she's ever interacted with, because characters in the show have no life outside of the screen. You can make a very compelling character with this trope, but you can also make an uninteresting and tired one. It just depends on the characterization. We learn in great detail about Kana's life and why she's the way she is, starting with her being a child actor. This part we even get to experience and know about before we see her as a teenager, so we get to feel for how she used to be as kind of a snobby child actor. She's very haughty and full of herself, which makes Aqua and Ruby hate her right away. However, when Aqua outacts her on a movie together, she gets really upset, but also acknowledges that he's done the role better than her. So she's really surprisingly self-aware as well. It's kind of to an unrealistic degree here, but the idea is good. As we get to know more about her as a teenager, we see some of her self-deprecating tendencies and insecurity about her skills and talent. In the large time skip from her child acting days to when the series takes place later, she's gone through a lot of development. She was constantly vying for more roles and acting to support herself, but once she hit middle school she was no longer really worth hiring for being a child actor, instead just becoming any regular person without a ton of value. Kana struggles to find roles and basically takes any job opportunity to make a living, as her mother isn't really putting forth a ton of effort to support her, instead focused on other family and being assured that the strong and talented Kana can just do it on her own. This puts a ton of pressure on her and leads to present day, where she's kind of just doing minor roles acting in random shows and has lost her confidence despite putting a ton of effort in. Detailing it all here, Kana has a lot to her character. We feel a bit bad for her since the industry has been rough to her despite her talent and effort, and we want to see her succeed. At the same time though, it's kind of hard to feel really bad for her because she's constantly doing the really annoying tsundere bit and being harsh to everyone around her. I think the idea behind her being so snide and rude to everyone is that they were clearly leaning to the idea that she was a child actor who thought she was better than everyone else, hence the bad attitude. However, that concept doesn't really make sense for Kana, who, since the age of fucking 5 years old, has had enough self-awareness and humbleness to admit when Aqua performs in a scene better than her. She throws a fit about it and wants to outdo him, but she's a literal child and doesn't even try to deny that he's a good actor or anything by that point. If she was truly the snobby child actor with a god complex, she should react entirely different here, it feels like. Instead, Aqua is validated almost instantly, and it's not really an issue, it's just her feeling like she's behind him. What would a character like that change into, given the full decade or so of development I detailed earlier? She is forced to become more self-dependent and struggles through a very humbling and tough career, basically taking any job that comes her way as a middle and high schooler. Well, she gains a bunch of insecurities and loses some of her motivation without really losing the snark and the foul mouth. Her insecurities come from a place of struggling to find work and being relatively unsuccessful when she does find work, and not really having any dedicated fans anymore. She feels unwanted, basically. However, she continues being mean and kind of pushing people away, which would be kind of poetic, but the show doesn't really acknowledge the dichotomy here. It's more like being mean is her funny, hilarious anime quirk that everyone still likes her despite being obnoxious, which means that this part of her character doesn't need to see any development apparently, leaving us to only focus on the being unwanted and having no motivation part. This basically just manifests in not wanting to do anything and being forced by other characters to do anything, in her case becoming the center for their idol group. Oh joy, another character with no drive or goals who exists to be pushed around by the plot in the hopes of doing anything. I love how proactive and interesting these characters are. Her feeling unwanted now only really means that she gives into peer pressure despite telling you all smugly about how she won't give into peer pressure and do whatever you want, as well as being hopelessly in love with Aqua because he shows any amount of interest in her. I think this character could be good if she wasn't written so clearly as a justification for having a smug child actor tsundere love interest for the main character, with her actual reasoning for doing so clearly being secondary. It results in this weird character who kind of feels all over the place and really can be anything the plot demands. When we need someone to push back against the group or cause a problem, it can be her for hesitating for some reason because of her struggles. Whenever we need another member of the group or someone to actually be good at singing or whatever, it can be her because in spite of not wanting to help or being against the idea, we can just make her do it anyways. There's a recurring joke where Kana is constantly getting peer pressured into doing something she clearly doesn't want to and even says, "Hey, I'm not gonna do this," but then when the scene transitions, she ends up doing it anyways. The joke is the character is inconsistent. It doesn't really make sense for a character who is this self-aware to give in anyways, nor does it make sense for a character who is pushing others away. It feels like the show is picking and choosing when to make her obnoxious and trying to distance herself from others, and when it wants her to be the tsundere who's actually good friends with everybody and loves the main character. She seemingly feels written to tick a bunch of boxes on a character sheet that says, okay, well, we need a love interest, we need a tsundere, we need an annoying character, we need a gimmick character. It's just so obnoxious. The scene where it's most obvious how strangely constructed this character is would probably be in episode 10 when she's talking to Aqua, who is pretending to be Peon. He gives her a compliment when she's doubting herself, and she responds super negatively and basically says that he's just buttering her up and that he doesn't know anything about her. Here it is, the moment where she's trying to push someone away. He then states a few things about her, and she just instantly flips the switch, and within 3 sentences is talking about falling in love with him instead of Aqua because she likes talking to him. This character is so beyond bipolar and flimsily constructed that she can just say anything at any time. This is an anti-character. I think other than Kana is the closest the show comes to having a good character, but she's kind of a victim of the poor writing. She gets the task of being the delegated exposition dumper, which makes us already want to hear her stop talking given that she's basically reciting the entire fucking plot at us every episode. As I've said before, she is also victim to the whims of being forced to do whatever to advance the plot in the parts about the idol group forming. Other than that, she just jumps around too much and is too incoherent to really get attached to, in my opinion. I know people like her a lot, but I also know that there's plenty of people who found her obnoxious or boring or nonsensical, and I think this is why. They should have just chosen to focus on a few of her aspects more closely, such as the smug child actor personality or the deep insecurities and feeling unwanted, rather than trying to do everything and making a character who just doesn't make any sense. Speaking of characters who don't make any fucking sense, Akane is pretty cryptic. She's very likable since she's just a very honest girl who is trying to do her best on set at all times. We meet her on the dating show that Aqua does, and the plot of that arc is that Akane is struggling to find her place in the show given that there's already a very popular girl on it. Trying to meet expectations, she decides to play more of a heel in the show, but accidentally takes it too far and leaves a mark on the main girl's face. Everyone on set is good friends by this point, so she doesn't take it badly and they all forgive her, but social media doesn't see all that, instead she starts getting flamed really badly online. Akane tries to apologize, but just adds fuel to the flames and gets more death threats and horrible comments, along with feeling like she's failing to keep interest in the show. This snowballs into a horrible mental state culminating in trying to kill herself with Aqua saving her at the last second. All of this is unfortunately very realistic and based off of an actual real-life event, which is maybe a bit insensitive, but not necessarily bad writing. I don't really have any issue with this plotline, and I think the resolution of the whole cast coming together and clearing up the bad press with Akane and accepting her more deeply into the group is really sweet. It does make me cringe a little bit that we have another arc of Aqua being the only one to save this girl, and to do a thing out of nowhere that makes her fall in love with him, though. The isekai protagonist syndrome feels stronger than ever in this arc, as Aqua adds another character to his harem by literally saving her from suicide. I do have a problem with what follows this, though, as Akane and some of the other cast members ask Aqua what his type is so that Akane can try to be more like that, with him citing that Ai Hoshino from Komachi-B is basically his ideal girl. Let's ignore the implications on that one for a little bit. Akane goes home to study Ai online, and this is where we get the big power level reveal of how talented of an actor Akane truly is. She apparently has the ability to get really in-depth and psychoanalyze people from video and interviews, making a ton of comments to Aqua about her personality, getting literally everything perfect to the point where she points out that likely Ai secretly had children and parented them without anyone finding out. This is a literal superpower, and we learned that she's actually one of the most talented actors in this big theater group and seemingly an up-and-coming big deal in the industry. Aqua has a little arc of playing into the show and trying to reciprocate affection with her to get more information, but she can tell, and he basically just is honest with her at that point forward. It doesn't really amount to anything much, but putting Akane back into harem status rather than actually being someone that he, dates. The problem with this is that it completely clashes with what we learned about her previously. She was always the struggling girl on set who was trying really hard to meet expectations. This leads to conflict in the dating show because she just can't figure out what kind of character she should be, and she can't adjust properly, leading to her making a mistake and getting flamed online. However, apparently, I'm also supposed to buy into the idea that she's actually super impossibly talented, to the point where she has a whole superpower of psychoanalysis, and can learn everything about someone from interviews and video footage, as well as perfectly mimic them, and even fool Aqua by acting like Ai Hoshino, who he knew on a deeply personal level as her literal child. This is where you have lost me. How in the fuck Is she this god-tier actor, an extremely talented individual with a literal superpower, but also she can't figure out how to act decently on a random-ass dating show? I get maybe the idea is that, like, it's out of her wheelhouse a little bit, but it does not justify the huge gap in understanding and acting ability. Half the dudes on the show are just random influencers, and they do perfectly fucking fine. Knowing what we do about her after her arc, she should be able to fit into that role easily and adjust herself, but she just can't for whatever reason. Again, this is a character with too much dichotomy. I cannot believe that she is all at once one of the most impressive young actors in the theater industry with crazy determination and ability to assume roles, but also struggles so hard with the dating show that she gets pushed into suicide. This is not the same character. These are two different personalities. This reminds me of Kana, who Akane makes it clear she's mortal enemies with. Apparently, they hate each other because Kana is such a gifted actor that she takes on tons of roles from other teen actors, so Akane has it out for her. Yes, the Kana whose backstory is that it was super hard for her to find any work because her fame as a child actor amounted to almost nothing. That same character is also so successful and popular that Akane and others dislike her because she takes all their roles. Make it make sense, man. Akane's plotline also makes it all feel a little bit worse that it's basically in service of adding another member to Aqua's harem. Like, can we not add a new character to the show who is a girl and has an arc with the main character without falling in love with him? I guess we do have Memcho. Beyond this, the rest of the cast is barely worth describing. You've got Ruby, who is Sarina from Prior. I've basically detailed her entire personality already, which is wanting to be an idol because she couldn't as a result of being terminally ill in her previous life. She's goofy and earnest, although I find it stupid that she doesn't ever learn how to sing properly despite loving idols so much, so that it can be a plot device to force Kana to be the center of the new Komachibi. Memcho is an aesthetic character mostly, being a cute YouTuber who is ditzy but hiding her age and secretly wanted to be an idol. Another kind of important character is Ai's manager's wife, who, after Ai dies and the manager pieces out, basically becomes the new manager of Strawberry Productions. She doesn't make any fucking sense though, given that she is introduced as this like wholly uninterested and lazy wife who wants to marry someone handsome instead of the manager. She gets forced into taking care of Ai's kids and gets tricked by them into not revealing everything, which is kind of funny but really goofy. But then when the time skip happens, she just like completely 180s her entire personality and becomes a really serious and dutiful manager of the company. Like what? I guess it's supposed to be brought along by Ai's death, but why even introduce that first plotline and gag if it's never brought up again and you were going to change the character so drastically? Am I just supposed to forget that and like her now? Because I don't. Ai Hoshino is the best character because she's kind of mysterious in a realistic way. We know a lot about her, but the viewer is intentionally kept outside of her head for the most part, and we're left to speculate on how she feels frequently. How does she feel about her ex? To what degree does she love her children? At any time, we're mostly left guessing on whether she means what she says, or if it's part of her phoning it in and trying to be as perfect as possible. Therefore, we're actually forced to engage with her as a character and put ourselves in her shoes. What she's thinking isn't always interesting, and sometimes it's hard to take her seriously when we see how absurdly bad of a parent she is, but the concept is good and it's executed well. She still feels mysterious by the end of the show because despite spending the whole 80-minute first episode with her, we feel like we don't know everything about her, just like how we don't know exactly how our friends or family feel or what they're thinking just by being around them. Unfortunately, none of the other characters are left any room to breathe like that and don't have nearly the same amount of intrigue going on. We know absolutely everything about Aqua and Ruby and Kana, but there's hardly anything worth thinking about. They feel more like cutouts of tropes slammed into a character design and placed on a piece of a story to serve as a role, rather than an actual person we want to learn more about, unlike Ai. If the rest of the show characterized its cast like it did with her, we would have much more interesting characters to be working with. However, it can't do that because it needs them to drive the plot forward and it needs us to understand what's happening. So we're forced through a ton of inner monologue and explanations of characters' entire lives in hopes that we will get attached to them. It just doesn't work. I can see how some people like the tropes these characters are based on, but they don't do it for me. I will admit though, the character designs for the show are absolutely stellar and likely doing a bulk of the heavy lifting for why people enjoy the show so much. The star eyes that Ai, Aqua, and Ruby have were apparently very hard to animate and required a lot of effort, but they all look fantastic. The designs have just a ton of flair and a unique aesthetic that you won't really see anywhere else. But that's enough about the characters.
Part 3.
The themes. Okay, but what is Oshi no Ko about? Oshi no Ko is an analytical look inside the entertainment industry, largely about idols and also TV shows and movies. It takes a pretty cynical and seemingly realistic approach to what's important for the people running the production and those involved in it, from casting to the actual day-to-day filming. It very correctly paints the entertainment industry as a tough place where mostly we watch newcomers struggle to get a foothold and run into tons of challenges. On the idol aspect of the series, a lot of focus is given to how idol culture is pretty strange and bad. Idol fans are obsessive to an unhealthy degree and form parasocial relationships with idols, despite being an idol obviously being a character that these girls play more than their real personality. The crux of Ai Hoshino's inner struggle is trying to perfect her craft and be the best idol, while simultaneously acknowledging that she's putting on a fake character that people are taking seriously. She can't get past this layer of lies, finding it weird to sing about love and having her audience love her, without ever having truly had a healthy family life or knowing what unconditional love feels like, since I was an orphan. I think Ai coming to terms with figuring out what love is like through raising kids is good, but I think she should have acknowledged it before dying. I don't think it should have taken tons of years for her to figure out in that way, and should have been a gradual thing instead. I would have liked to see her figuring it out as she goes on and changing, but instead it's kind of left as an afterthought for that dramatic moment. She also comes to terms with the audience accepting her lies and trying to make them happy anyways, reasoning that it was basically her way of expressing love and hoping that it would reach them. Overall, I think that she was way too fixated on what was truthful or not, and came to realize that it doesn't really matter besides how you feel about it. I do feel like the show goes on too much about how the audience is buying into lies, and that idols are liars and deceiving them, etc., etc. This is one area where the poor writing hurts the show, because basically the problem is the lack of nuance. Yes, obsessing super hardcore over an idol is weird. It's well documented that idol culture is very messed up, such as the video that went around however many years ago, where that one pop star shaved her head and made a tearful apology, basically for having a boyfriend, like any normal teenager. It's messed up, and the culture seriously makes a lot of people miserable. However, the problem is not that these idols exist at all, it's the toxic culture. The normal fans who don't develop these crazy parasocial relationships aren't problems, and it's okay to have fun enjoying a character who sings and dances. But the show isn't satisfied with singling out the weird idol fans for being weird and making them the problem. Rather, it has to take the stance of, that's just how it is, and idol fans are just like this. I suppose the show would probably receive more backlash if it didn't take that stance, but it robs this whole plotline of any decent theming. Being afraid of this backlash is also probably why Aqua is a self-insert main character who is really cool and awesome despite being one of the really creepy obsessed fans, as it makes him into one of the good ones basically. Most fans of idols aren't idiots who are tricked into believing a lie, it's just that some of them are crazy people who can't separate reality from fiction. It really makes the development of the first episode fall flat when it speculates so much on the twisted fans who fall in love with her lies, when it's just like, not that serious, man? We watch a fun performance, the idols dance and smile, and the audience smiles too. That's it. Most people are normal. The overarching theme of the series seems to be combining idol culture with this cynical look at the entertainment industry, with the overall conclusion being, this industry really sucks, but at the end of the day, it's something people need and enjoy. When Ai dies, almost immediately Ruby is still wanting to be an idol despite her mom literally getting murdered over it because she sparkled. I feel like this self-sacrificing attitude that the art is all important and to some degree worth the suffering hurts the narrative. Because rather than thinking about how to improve the industry or acknowledge that it might be genuinely harmful, we're supposed to throw our hands up and go, well, that's just how it is. It feels like the series all at once wants to be cynical about the industry, but also brush past it and not even think about the idea that maybe it genuinely shouldn't be supported. But nope, can't have a world without idols. That's worse than hell. It starts to feel like the cynical criticism of the entertainment industry is just there to add more edge to the series, rather than promote actual discussion or playing with the ideas. The show does talk about the way the internet plays into stardom and celebrity culture being detrimental to them. People go online and talk shit and say any number of horrible things, and we see it affect Ai, Ruby, Aqua, and especially Akane heavily. It's a very good thing to portray and acknowledge, but it's also pretty obvious to anyone who goes online. We're not super breaking new ground here. I do like that we get to see Kana and how that self-deprecation online becomes very real easily as she begins to read it so much that she believes it herself. Oshinoko doesn't offer that much more commentary on the idea beyond it just sucking in general, but it is interesting. Other than that, I don't really know what else there is for theming in the series. Something could be said of the way Aqua kind of sort of tries to manipulate people, but honestly, the only real case of that so far is with Akane, who immediately he just comes clean to. I don't think it's really manifested into any theme by the point where the anime ends, and I doubt it would progress past anything more than, hey, treating people like tools isn't very nice. Maybe more will come of it, but I am not really holding my breath here.
Conclusion.
Oshinoko has made a huge splash in the anime and manga community, selling over 10 million volumes and being High Dive's best premiere on the platform ever, proving again that more than anything it just takes an interesting premise with a big hook and good character designs to make a show popular. People will stick through a slow show with little intrigue outside of the setup as long as you get their foot in the door, and I can't really blame them. After quote-unquote committing to a nearly 90-minute first episode, it doesn't feel like such a steep cost to watch an episode every week, which doesn't really make sense once you think about it. If a show doesn't prove to you that it has the writing to be consistently doing interesting things, you shouldn't be holding your breath and watching more. But you know, there's external reasons to watch something, like wanting to be part of the conversation. If you like this show and somehow made it through this whole video, thank you for putting up with me. Even if you find yourself disagreeing with everything I said here, that is fine. However, I ask that you don't use your thoughts being challenged as an excuse to double down on it simply being a difference in opinion, but rather an opportunity to re-examine what you value in media and how a piece of art does or does not achieve that. If you like or dislike this show, continuously reevaluate it and ask yourself whether or not it did something meaningful to achieve that effect. Will you come back to the show in a few months once the hype has died down? Once the manga has ended? Once season 2 has come and gone? Or is this another series to fill your time when it's popular and disregard it once it's off your screen? I encourage you to seek your own answers, but I also encourage you to continue watching and reading more in the medium and expanding your taste. I also really encourage you to think about what your scores mean and how much you truly enjoyed a show. You may come to find that other shows take the aspects you like in this one and do it better or more meaningfully, or you might find that the show really did do something special. But it really is fine to have fun with a show but not necessarily give it a 9 or a 10. I can't answer any of these questions for you, only discuss my own thoughts on why this show didn't really have anything impressive behind it other than the stellar audio-visual design and a crazy hook for a first episode. My next video I'd like to move on to will likely be the longest one on my channel and has taken a lot of time and effort to produce, so I ask for some of your patience on that. I may or may not come out with some shorter ones in between this and that, but either way I appreciate you all. See you next time.